Imagine being able to predict where crime will happen before it does. Police on the right street, at the right time, every time. That's the promise of predictive policing. But what if the data behind that promise is flawed? Or worse, what if it points us in the wrong direction? Dr. Wesley Oliver is a law professor, legal historian, and curriculum innovator at Duquesne University School of Law. In one of his most unusual classes, Oliver teaches students to code, not to replace legal reasoning, but to enhance it. His focus: how algorithms shape law enforcement decisions, and what happens when clean data tells a misleading story. To explore that, he turns to a city more than 2,000 miles away, Vancouver, Canada.
So Vancouver they have for 20 years or so been collecting a lot of data on crimes in the city.
Okay.
And in that database, they have it wonderfully laid out, as a lot of places are now doing, by longitude and latitude. And like your phone actually will give you 4 significant digits of longitude and latitude, which is just kind of unreal. And so Vancouver has come up with a predictive model for burglary, because burglary is better recorded in Vancouver than any of the other crimes. And so we recreate the wheel. We redo a predictive model for Vancouver burglaries. And so when we're done with it, then, or even as we're building it, we start to recognize certain problems with it. So we notice certain things, like we'll notice that there's a spike in burglaries every night in Vancouver at midnight, exactly at midnight.
Midnight every night? Not 11 p.m., not 1 a.m., just midnight?
Why is there a spike at midnight? So we start to talk about it, and I lead them to figure this out. Midnight is probably a default. When the officer, or when there's no time listed for a burglary, it probably defaults to midnight.
The model wasn't predicting crime. It was revealing a pattern created by missing information. Default values quietly filling in the blanks.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get things like a spike in burglaries around 7 and 8 o'clock. Why would you get a spike in burglaries around 7 or 8 o'clock? That's not the time people burglarize, but it is the time people wake up and they discover a broken window, or they discover something stolen from their garage.
In other words, the timestamps weren't recording when the crimes occurred. They reflected when they were discovered, and that changes everything. Because if police were to rely on that model, they might be in the wrong place, at the wrong time, following data that never told the full story. Vancouver's data infrastructure is unusually detailed. It logs crime locations with geographic precision, longitude, latitude, and often timestamps. On the surface, it's a model of modern transparency, but Dr. Oliver's students uncovered something important. Even structured data can create false signals.
We delve into the data, and it turns out they haven't recorded the time of assaults in Vancouver. So you're not now able to predict it by the hour, right? So
that missing data introduces blind spots, patterns that don't reflect reality, but the way data was or wasn't entered.
there's this wonderful line, like, when you can't measure what actually counts, you count what you can measure. And what they can measure is burglary. It's imperfect, and we talk about that. But we talk about how when you count what you can measure, the result may be that you underenforce other crimes. Because if you're allocating on the basis of burglary, you might not have enough police officers around the bars at closing time, so you might under-deter and under-enforce assault.
That's the lesson. A model can only act on the data it's given. And if that data is incomplete or skewed, even well-intentioned systems can drift off course. When something like burglary gets measured in detail, but assaults don't, the model's guidance begins to tilt. Not because of malice, but because of omission.
So we look at not just the data and how the data works, but we look at the concept of how well are we predicting. Are there certain reasons to think our data leads us askew? And then we ask the question, let's assume our data is perfect on burglary. And we're gonna allocate resources to deter and enforce burglary. What are the consequences for the rest of crime if we do that? So That's what that class does.
What Dr. Oliver teaches isn't just data analysis, it's data skepticism. Because sometimes the danger isn't a corrupt system, it's a clean system built on incomplete information. When police decisions follow flawed patterns in the data, even a precise system can produce a distorted result. Because data isn't always a mirror, sometimes it's just a map. And sometimes the map leads us straight into the mistake.